Right, so we're on our Rover 75 1.8 Connoisseur SE. It's our maroon one, and one of the early jobs we wanted to do on it is to change the cam belt. And when we take a car, and we always do that, sometimes you don't know the history, but even if there is a receipt or something saying that the cam belt was done, we think you can never fully trust that, even if all the documentation looks good. So we feel a lot safer changing the cam belt, even if it would suggest it isn't that old. And the thing is, sometimes low mileage and the cam belt sitting there doesn't do it any good either. So even if the mileage hasn't changed much, that cam belt could have sat around a lot. So we always think it's worth changing. So that's what we're going to be doing on this, and hopefully we'll take you through the process so you can see us doing a cam belt on a K Series 75 1.8. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is remove this plastic casing and then go on to remove the rocker cover, which you wouldn't normally need to do, but we're going to do that because we always paint where this is black. We paint this red normally, and it gives us a good chance to have a look round it as well, and it does give you a little bit more space around the engine when we start to take the casing off. So that's the first stage we're going to do. So we've removed the coils and the wiring and that sensor, and we haven't gone into too much detail into that, as technically it's not necessary to do this to do a cam belt. But while we're doing the cam belt, as I said, we're doing that so we can do that painting. It'll also give us a chance to just have a check under there and look at the cam shafts as well. But if you would like to see more detail in removing this rocker cover, we have got a video on us purely doing that and painting it all up. And that's the spark plugs removed, and they're looking not too bad colour either. So as you can see there, they're all looking more or less like that. But they certainly need changing, which we will be changing at a later time once we've done all the rest of the work. And what we've done, we've had a little look at the cam shafts, and we've put this back. This is just acting as a little bit of protection over them. And while we're painting the cover here, we're put an old one on top that we've got spare as well, just so no dampness or dirt can get inside. That's what we're also going to do while we've got the time, and again, because this is a new car to us, we thought we'd just do one the little compression test where you use one of these gauges that gives you the compression of the engine, doing one cylinder at a time through the spark plug hole. What we've done with this one in the past, we found it's quite a problem putting this hose all the way down into the engine and getting it screwed in, so we've now bought an extension, so it's giving us a chance to try that out, so it's a lot easier to get our gauge in there. So what I'm going to do is turn the engine over, and then we'll have a little look at what the pressure comes to. And what we're looking for really is roughly even pressures across them all, nothing really too low either. Right, so what we've got to do now, we're sitting inside the car, is turn the engine over. Now it won't start because all the spark plugs are removed, and as I showed you, we do it on all 4 cylinders. So I'm going to turn it over right now. Right, that's enough, and we'll go and have a look and see what the pressure is. Right, so we've just turned the engine over, as you see, and the gauge has come up, and it come up to roughly about 100. It's already dropping a little bit by the time I've come round, but now what we're going to do is do the other 4. Right, so what we're going to do is we swap places, and I'm going to let you see the gauge go this time. So if you're ready to start it up. And that just lets you see it from this side as well. and the reading is just over the 100. Right, so that's our little compression test done. It's certainly a lot easier with the extension that we've bought for this engine anyway, and they've all come out just over the 100, so we're going to say probably around about 110 to be generous. And the good thing is they are all quite even, which doesn't always happen. There are sometimes slight differences. These are more or less all even, and we just thought we'd do that little test just to check how things were, as it is an engine we haven't driven a lot and it is new to our car collection. So the other thing that's let us have a look at is that the oil flow is good up at the top. You can see that's plenty of oil where we've been turning it over. We've now put some tissue in the plug holes to make sure that no dirt goes in there, and we've written out our pressures. They're in PSI, as we said. They're all over 100, coming up to 110, so we've written them all out as 110, so it was a nice set of even pressures. Hopefully that's give you a little idea how we do a compression test, and hopefully it's of use to you. Right, what we're now going to do is we'll put this gasket back on. That'll protect any dirt getting into that, and we'll also put a temporary lid on there when we're painting the other one. And the next stage is to get on with the cam belt, and we're going to start off by removing the cam cover, the top half of the cam cover, and it's a series of bolts that go right round, and one just there. Right, so that's all 5 bolts out of the top cam cover. What we've done is that little hose that was there, we've just hooked back there out the way for now, just to give us a little bit more access. Now we can pull it out and actually have a look at the cam belt, because although this car did have quite a bit of service history with it, there was nothing there that said the cam belt had ever been done. We'd be surprised if it had never been done, and quite worrying if it hasn't ever been done. But yeah, this will give us a good look once we've got the cam cover off. Yeah, so a little bit of levering up, and that's the cover off. Actually quite tight, which may mean it's not been off too often, which is always a good thing. Yes, let's give us a good look. The belt certainly isn't a new belt, and there looks a little bit of wear on it, not frighteningly bad, but it's certainly worn, and certainly well worth us changing, which we would do anyway. The next stage is to time the engine up. That's what we'll be doing next. So I've just come down underneath the car, and this one has actually got a full under tray. Now our other 75 hasn't got anything at all, so we think there's certainly something missing, but this one has got the full under tray fully intact, so we're going to remove that, and once it's down we'll have a little better look at it, and I'll show you some of the mounting points. Well, but it looks like it is a series of screws along the front of the plastic bumper, and then some screws down holding it across the chassis. So that's what we're going to take down next, so we've got better access. Right, so there's the under tray out. Actually quite nice. It's got some insulation there as well, and as you can see there's a series of fixing points all the way along, and then along the front of the bumper, and then back round and there. So just a series of fixing points holding it, and this is the side that normally would be down to the road side. So yeah, actually quite a nicely built engine protector. So if your 75 has got one, it's probably well worth removing to do a lot of jobs, because it gives you quite a bit more access, and comes away not too bad. So we're now going to remove the wheel, and then go on to remove the plastic liner, which on these runs all the way round in the wheel arch, and that will then finally give us the full access to make things easier. Right, so that's the wheel removed, and probably we will have to change the brakes before we go into full use of this car, but that will be another video. But now the wheel's off, it is the plastic wheel arch liner, and that is a mixture of these plastic screws normal little Phillips screws, and even some of those little bolts as well, so a little bit of a mixture. And also you've got the cables for your ABS and brake warning light, which you have to unplug and just pull through that plastic casing, and then that should be removed. Right, so we've now pulled those wires through, and they're just located there, two little plugs, and that is for the, as I said, the ABS and brake warning plug. And we pulled them through those two holes, then we'll unplug them from there, push the plugs back up, and that'll let us get the wheel arch completely away. Just the last screw there, and what we've also done is remove that little shielding that's there as well, and now we should be able to remove the wheel arch. Right, and that's the last bolt. There's always one you find as you start to get the wheel arch down. And there is the plastic wheel arch liner removed, and as you can see, there's these fixing points all the way round. Basically, it's just a case of going round and finding them all. Even we missed a couple and then had to go back in and remove them as we were getting the wheel arch down. But most of them are screws, and those sort of plastic screws, and there's one bolt which is right up hidden here when it's in the wheel arch. So yeah, as you can see, now we've removed that plastic wheel arch liner, we've got a lot better access into the bottom, and a good view actually through into the top part of the engine as well, so it'll certainly make things a lot easier. Right, so the next thing for us to do is to put the engine into the timing positions, or time the engine up. This one actually hasn't got many marks from where other people have done it before, but we, even if they had, would always put our own little white dots on. So we're going to mark a little mark there on the pulley, and up at the top again there's no markings at all. So if the camber has been done, somebody didn't put their own little bit of white paint or markers on, which you often find when you open these up. But it's nice for us because we can put it on, make it nice and neat, and know they're our own marks. So that's what we're doing before we time it up. So we've now got our little bit of white paint in the actual marking on the pulleys and up here at the top. And now what we do is turn the engine over by hand to they all line up in the correct places. Right, so we're now going to turn the engine over so we can get it timed. We're going to turn it from the crankshaft pulley. There's a little marking on the pulley that lines up with a little marking on the plastic case, and it's around about 1 o'clock, and that's the one you need to get at 1 o'clock, so that the ones up here do line up in the middle. So if we start turning the engine over, you'll see we've marked the two little time marks, as I said, with white paint, and we're there. Might need to come just back a little bit. Yeah, and as you can see, they're lining up, and what we do is we put the camshaft locking tool in there, and that'll make sure it is definitely aligned. Right, so the next thing we're going to be doing is removing this engine mounting, and that is because we need the camshaft locking tool in, but also this mounting has to be removed to get the cam belt off, and also the access would be terrible as well. So that's what we're going to do next. But to do that, obviously the engine then wouldn't be mounted properly, so what we do is use a trolley jack. You can see there one of our smaller older trolley jacks with some blocks of wood we put up under the engine, and that supports it so that we can then remove that mounting safely. And the other good thing while we're doing this job, and because this is a new car to our collection, it gives us a good look under the wheel arch with that wheel arch cover removed, and when we do the painting job on it, all this will be accessible for that as well. So for us it's a double good reason for doing it. But even for you, if you're doing this job when you've got all that plastic removed, it gives you a good look in, and you can see if there's any sort of areas or surface rust that needs treating. It's well worth doing while you've got all the bits removed. So that's the engine supported by our trolley jack, and the reason we use the trolley jack is so you can slightly lower or higher the engine, and of course the engine's still well held in by all its mountings. This is just to give it a little bit of support so none of them are really put under strain or you don't do any damage. Right, so we're now going to remove the engine mounting. These are normally quite tight. The good thing with this mounting is though that it is in almost sections. So there's the part that's bolted to the body, the midway part here, and the bit that's connected to the engine, and we'll remove two of those parts, leaving one bit beyond. We'll show you that once we've removed it, or you'll see how we're doing that as we remove it. Right, so what we've done, as you've been seeing, we've removed the 3 bolts here which go down into the part of the bracket that's bolted to the engine. We've also removed those 2 there, loosened this one, and that one down there we've removed, and we had to use the air gun to do that because of the flex in the bracket, and then hopefully that should come away in one piece and allow us to put that locking tool in, and also give us access to start removing the rest. Right, and that gives you a better view of what we've removed. We'll probably leave this behind. That shouldn't need removing. We have to remove that, but to remove that we're going to have to remove the pulley down there, get the plastic casing off at the bottom, which will give us access to the rest of the bolts that aren't on show at the moment. I think it's probably one bolt you can't get to while that plastic cover is there, and it also now will allow us to put in our cam locking tool, and that's now in locking the cams into place and keeping the engine timed. Right, so now we're going to remove the pulley next, but before we can do that, that pulley also drives the alternator and air conditioning pump, and another belt coming off of it goes over the back to the power steering pump. It's both on automatic tensioners, so it's a case of detensioning both those belts and then removing them. So that's what we're going to do next. Right, so before we remove those belts that I just talked about, we're going to loosen the bolt on the main pulley. That's quite a tight bolt, and the way we do it, although there is a tool that can lock the engine, what we do is put the car in gear and put our foot on the foot brake, and then use an air gun to loosen it off, and that normally works and is a lot easier to do as well. And that's it off and out. Of course, when it was really tight, I was over my foot on the brake. Now I've come back round just to see it coming out, and it really was very, very tight, tighter than they normally are, but it's off now. Right, and so as the pulleys come off easy once we got that tightness out the way, that's allowed us to just remove the belts without using the tensioner, so that's made that a little bit easier. So we've got one off, and you can just see that one hanging there. We'll just unhook that and bring it down and out the way, and that's those belts off. Well, so what we're going to do now, and this is something again you wouldn't necessarily need to do, is we're going to loosen these 2 camshaft sprockets. We're doing that while the belt's still on, because it'll be a little bit easier to do, because we actually want to remove them and clean them up and possibly even paint them like you may have seen on some of the other cars we've done. So that's what we're going to do next, is just loosen them so that once the cam belt's off, they will be very easy to remove. Right, that's them loosened. and that'll then make that easier when we want to remove them. Right, so now we've got the main pulley off, we're now going to remove the bottom plastic cover that protects the cam belt, and that then will allow us to remove that last bit of the engine mounting that's bolted onto the engine in the middle of the cam belt.
Right, jack the engine back up.
Now we've got the bottom plastic camshaft cover removed. That's now going to give us that access to remove that bolt you can't get to, and make it easier to get to the other bolts on that last bit, the engine mount that's still bolted to the engine. You can see we've started to remove those bolts, and we'll continue doing that. But while you're under here, to give you another sort of check that your timing is lined up. Now the pulley's removed, you can see the crankshaft cog, and hopefully you can see there's that little line, if I point to that there on the engine, and then you should be able to see two little dots on that cog, and they should line up. Basically you should see that little line in between the two dots on each cog, and that's just a second sort of way of checking your timing after you've done it at the top, and check that the pulley lines up with the plastic cover. Once, as I say, that pulley's removed, the plastic cover's removed, you can see the cog, and you've got a second way of checking your timing. Right, so we've finally got the last bolt out of this bracket. Quite a difficult one. The bolts were tight all the way out, but they're finally all out, and what we'll probably do is let it drop down, hopefully, and come out from the bottom. And now that's clear, you can see just how much more space that gives you. Technically you don't have to remove it. We think it'd make the job a lot more difficult, and though it's a struggle to get it out, once it's out you've got much more space near the tensioner and when you change the water pump as well. Right, so we now should be able to loosen the automatic tensioner, giving a slack on the belt so we can remove the old cam belt. We're taking the bolt right out and removing the tensioner so the belt goes completely loose, and be nice and easy for us to remove. And also we always buy a cam belt kit that comes with a new tensioner and a new water pump.
Right, that's on there. Right, now you can disengage the belt. That's it. Right, there's the tensioner.
Right, so there's the tensioner now removed, and the belt just comes away nice and easy. Right, so now we've removed the cam belt and the tensioner, we can get access to removing the water pump. It is just a series of bolts that go all the way around. The only one to watch out for is there's one long stud just there, and then there's a little bolt in the end of it. We've put it back, and that's what holds the plastic cover, or one of the fixings for the plastic cover. The other awkward one is around here, down by the dipstick. Hopefully you can see that just there, and that's quite an awkward bolt to get out. Now in our case it appears that bolt's not there, so whoever last worked on the car never put that last water pump bolt in, so we're going to have to find that bolt when we put it back in, but in most cases that will be there. So that's what we're going to do next, and what I'll do, I'll show you the pump once we've got it off so you can get a good idea of all those sort of fixing points, or where the bolts go all the way around it. But really the only one to remember where it goes is that stud there. Right, so we've got all the little bolts undone now. So now it's time to pull the water pump away. We've got a bowl underneath because water will come out, especially if your system's not been drained. So it's just a case of now wiggling it loose because it does sit on some dales. And that's the pump coming out. Right, so what we're going to do is now remove the cam wheel cogs. Something you don't have to do, but as we said, we're moving them so we can clean them up and possibly even paint them so they match like our other engines. So it's just a case of gently leaving them away and then pulling off. That one we've already done, and the next one we're about to do, and we've put a little mark on them just so we know which side they go, although technically that isn't relevant due to the original markings, but it's always worth doing. Right, so what we're doing while that water pump is off forward, we put the cam belt through, we'll just put a little bit of water in the header tank so it washes through and flows out through where the water pump is, and just wash out any of that dirty antifreeze and any dirty water. It's not a full flush, but it just gets rid of any sort of surplus old antifreeze, so when we put ours in it'll be hopefully a much fresher lot. You can never get all the water out, but this is better than doing nothing when you've got a chance to just flush out as much water as you can. Yeah, and as you can see, hopefully it's now just running out where the water pump hole is, and now after a couple of those bottles it's running fairly clear, so it's just flushed out the big majority of that sort of dirty water and weak antifreeze that's left. So hopefully most of the water will be fresh, as I say, and it will be mainly our own antifreeze in there. It's just something that we thought was worth doing while we were doing this, and as we're not putting the cam belt on straight away, we're going to clean all that surface. It'll be well dry by the time we start doing that. Right, so we're just washing the side or that surface of the engine that you can't normally get to because of all the cam belt and its workings and water pump. And you may have noticed in other videos there was almost like that sort of, not corrosion really, but you get that sort of staining from past antifreeze, so we can remove all that. Not really too dirty in there, but we always do like to give it a little bit of a clean, so that's what we're doing at the moment. Right, so as you can see, the engine's looking a lot clean after we'd brushed it down with some cleaning fluid and parts washer fluid. What we actually went on to use was this little gun here, and actually something we got from Lidl, and we got it just really as a tryout, as it wasn't that expensive, but it really does work well. And what you do is you put your airline on here, and then you can put cleaning fluid in here. We put some parts washer cleaning fluid, quite diluted, but you can actually even connect your hose up to there, and the air will actually bring it out almost like a sort of a pressure washer, kind of using the air pressure from your air compressor, and that really has removed all that sort of dirt and grease, and we've even been able to get in all around this engine mounting and remove that as well. What we're going to do now is wash some of the other bits in the part washer. Yeah, so all we're doing now is just cleaning up some of the parts in our parts washer, just to get them nice and clean. It is a slow and steady job. We'll probably be cleaning the rocker cover as well as we've removed that. So yeah, we'll just be doing a mixture of cleaning all the bits up now. And we're just going to continue on cleaning all the bits. So I thought while we're doing a little bit of cleaning up on some of the stuff, I'd just have a little look at the cam belt kit we buy and talk about why we buy a kit as well. But before that, don't forget to look through some of the other videos we're doing on the channel. If you're liking the video, don't forget to like it as well, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We also do an Instagram page and a Twitter page as well, and links to that are on our home page of this YouTube channel. So we always buy a cam belt kit, and that's because we like to get the water pump and also the automatic tensioner as well as the belt. The automatic tensioner really does need to be changed, but it'd be silly not to change it because one, you don't know if it's going to retension right, and secondly, if it starts to wear or get noisy, you'd have to replace it, which would mean doing a whole cam belt job just for that tensioner. And really it's the same with the water pump. The water pump is driven from the cam belt, so if the water pump was to fail a few months after you've done your cam belt again, you'd more or less have to do the whole job again just to change the water pump. Now the other thing we found, and we sort of actually found in the early days of us working with the K series engine, we didn't replace the water pump the first time, and it then did leak, so we learnt from experience. But what we think often happens is that when the water pump gets older and worn, although it won't leak with your old cam belt, if you then put a new cam belt on that's retensioned, that puts a lot of stress on that old pump and will often make it leak. So often if you leave the old water pump there and put a new cam belt on, there's a good likelihood that pump will start to leak because of that extra stress with the new cam belt being retensioned on it. So from our own experience and what we've seen, we certainly think it's worth it. And again, in the whole scheme of things, the kits are not that much dearer than the cam belt on its own, so it's worth doing. And again, it seems a nice kit. It's one we used on our 1845, because more or less that doesn't really change. So we've got that kit again. As you can see, it comes with a nice new belt, the tensioner, and the water pump coming with its little seal instructions, and the pump in there, which will let you have a little better look at when we start doing the job. But I just thought while we're doing some of the cleaning up, I'll just show you the kit we get and why we tend to do it that way, and why we change the water pump and the tensioner when we do it. So what we're also doing is just giving all the bolts we've removed a wire brush on our wire wheel, and slowly wire brushing them all up. And once they're all clean, they're going into the magnet trays with all the clean bolts. So as I was showing you the other night, we've been cleaning and washing the stuff. We're washing some of this plastic cam belt cover and the camshaft cover in the parts washer. We were wire brushing up some of the bolts, and we've got some there ready to paint as well, and that's what we're doing at the moment, is painting up some of this stuff. We're painting the engine mounting, the crankshaft pulley, and also the cam cogs as well, and we're going to do them in a mixture of red and also black paints. That's what we're doing currently at the moment. So as we continue to paint, the bolts have all got their heads painted black. We've got the bracket painted black, or that part of the bracket. Of course, we've still got that part to paint red. We're painting the pulley red at the moment, and also the camshaft pulleys. They're going to be painted red, just like on a lot of other cars. I say, because this is the first time we've worked on this car, as well as doing the jobs, we're doing the painting as well. So I'm going to continue on with that, and with the red paint, it always seems to need at least 2 coats, sometimes more, whereas with the black paint, sometimes you could even get away with the 1 coat. What we're doing is the black is hammerite, and the red is a heat-proof engine paint. So as these bits will likely get warm, we've just done it in that paint to make sure it lasts as long as it can. The dots there are just so that we know that this is the in cam, and that's the out cam. Technically they're all marked, and these 2 cogs are identical, but we like to keep them the same way around, and marking them just make sure of that. Right, so we've got the crankshaft pulley pretty well painted. The cogs, the camshaft cogs have got their first coat on. I probably need another one. And we're now painting that bridging part of the engine mounting that goes from the body across to the mounting that mounts the engine, which is this one we've been painting black. So we're just continuing to slowly paint these parts, and as I say, with the red, probably a couple of coats are needed, but I thought I'd show you the first coat because you can see that transformation from the original colour to our colours that we tend to paint our sort of engines and bits in. Right, so that's now the two engine mounts painted, the bottom pulley and also the cogs up on the top for the camshaft. So they're now all painted and ready to go back on. We've also got all the little tops of the bolts painted black. And what we normally always do is try and incorporate the painting into other jobs. So we're also painting some wheel nuts for the car. They were originally black and were looking a bit scruffy, and also some bits for the underneath, which is another job. So we've got plenty of bits to paint all in one section, which is always worth lining up if you can do. And of course we've still got the rocker cover to paint red as well, and we'll be doing that very soon. So that's the rocker head cover now painted in the red. So now all the bits that are painted that we wanted to get painted, we're at the time to start reassembling and get the cam belt back on. But while it's all off, I just want to give you a little look at the cover and how it sits around that main mounting that joins to the engine, and also the crankshaft pulley, and how we were lining that little mark up to the marking on the plastic casing that we marked with that white paint, and also a chance to see the engine mounting off, and that's roughly sitting like that, and then joining to the part of the mounting that we left off. And the reason you need to remove all this casing to get this bracket off is because there is one mounting point hidden there. So when you put it back, you need to put that back first, then the cover, and you have to remove the cover to get it off. And another thing you don't often get a good look at, and we might not do once we put it back together, is the tensioner. That's the old tensioner there. We haven't got the new one out of the box yet, but we'll show you hopefully it being tensioned up, and how it all works, and how this tensioner you set, and it's more or less sort of an off-centric cam, and by twisting it one way loosens it, and twisting it the other way using this Allen key here, it gets tighter and then keeps that tension. So we'll be showing you all that as well. Yes, I just wanted to show you that little distance look at all the bits just before we start putting it back, because some of you can't get a really good look once they're being reassembled onto the car. So the first thing we'll be putting back is the water pump. This is a water pump that came in our kit. It comes with the rubber seal and that little bit of plastic that goes over this little drip thing on the bottom. I just want to give you a little look off of the car, because you don't often get a full look at it. That's the back side, and you can see the recess where the seal goes, and of course you've got this little threaded hole at the top that connects to part of the plastic casing, the cam belt casing. It's sort of difficult to get to, we mentioned that before. So that's that hole there. It's marked up as being tested as well. It's a fairly straightforward pump, a direct drive, so very little that can go wrong with it, only that after wear it can leak. But that's why, as I said before, we put a new pump on, so that hopefully eradicates that chance. So before we do put the pump on, we like to just check that the surface is clean and clear, ready for that new rubber seal. So that's what we're doing at the moment, just making sure that the surface is clear and any sort of corrosion and dirt is removed. Right, so you may notice the little cog is missing off the crankshaft, and here it is. And I just want to cover this because we were just cleaning this and checking there was nothing on it that could damage the belt, and it came off. And it's not a problem if it does, because as you can see there's a little flat there, and also on the shaft you can see the flat there. So if it does come off, it can only go on in one direction. In some cases it won't come off and you might even need a puller to get it off. Now, on our other car that we're doing recently, this would not come off, so you'd have probably needed a little puller to remove it, but on this one it literally fell off. But if it does fall off on yours, it's not a big problem because you can get it back on without it affecting the alignment marks. There is only one way it can go back on, so I thought I'd just cover that. So while that cog is off and we've now had a chance to clean it up away from the car, I've also noticed that in the middle where the main bolt goes, you can see there's a little bit of rust in there, and that bolt was very tight coming off. So we're just going to clean the inside of that out and try and get some of that rust out. Yes, hopefully you can see that's now looking a lot cleaner in there, so we've got rid of that rust. So when the bolt goes back in, there's no chance of that making it a problem if it ever needs to come out again. Right, so now we're back to the water pump, and what we're going to be doing first is putting the sill on. And what we always do is just put a little bit of grease on that seal, and that's just to make sure that it stays in there, because when you're putting the pump on it could easily fall out or slip out of position, and although it can still do that, that bit of grease just sort of makes it less lightly. And what there also is, and you can't see that on this camera, is this seal has got a flat edge and that goes to the back, and the rounded edge goes to the side we can see. So when it gets clamped up, that will then seal onto the engine. Right, so now it's time to put the pump in. As you can see, there's a series of holes round it. Most of them are for the bolts, but two of them are dowels that you line up. So now we're going to put it on. So hopefully it should just sit there because it's sat on those two dowels. What we normally do is get two bolts in, and once they're in, do the rest, and then get them tightened up. So what we're doing now is just tightening up the bolts we put in hand tight. The ones to remember really is this slightly long one down there that's extended so that the cover can be fixed, and also the little awkward bolt that's just down here at the back of the covering, which is a job to see, but it goes in that way and holds this plastic casing to the water pump. And what we've had to do is find a replacement for that, because whoever did work on it at one time, they had left that one out. Right, so now it's time to put the cam sprockets back on. That's not something you'd necessarily have to do, but because we were painting them, we took them off. But I thought it'd just be useful to know that if you look at the shafts coming out from the cams, you'll see that there's like a little dowel there, and then if you look at the sprockets, you've got the central hole and two little slots off, and here you've got exhaust, and we've put a little white dot there. So you want the little lug to go into the inside if it's going on to the intake side, which is for that cam sprocket. And then you can see there's another little dowel sticking out, and when we come to put that sprocket on the exhaust side, you can see here that the in you can see is there, and we've put a little white dot over the exhaust mark, so on the exhaust that little lug will go there. So even if you hadn't marked them up, you can still sort it out and get the engine aligned, because essentially these two sprockets are identical, which I assume made it a lot easier when they were building the engine. They just built loads of them, and it all depends on which lug it goes in for your exhaust or your in is what gets that cam sprocket in the right place. So that's what we're going to do now. Right, so that's both of them on now without the bolts, and hopefully if I get the camera positioned roughly right, you'll be able to see there's the little white dot that we marked for our inlet cam, and on the exhaust cam you can see the little white dot there, and it's a real job to see with this camera, but hopefully you can see where that white dot is. You can just about see that the dial is in this little lug there, so we now know that they are aligned right. So what you may have noticed is the little white marks there and there that should be opposite each other aren't. That's because when we remove the sprockets, the cam slightly sprung round, which is why you need the locking tool to stop that happening. But we were removing those sprockets, so we knew that would happen. So now we've got the sprockets back on, we've now got to realign it so those two white lines line up here, and we can put the locking tool back ready to do the cam belt. So that's what we're going to do now. Right, so what we've done is we've moved the cam sprockets round so that we are back in time, and hopefully you can see the little white dot there and the little white dot there are lining up in the middle, and we've put our camshaft locking tool in. All we need to do now is just torque those bolts up to the right torque setting. So now that's done, we're at the point of putting the tensioner in, and the tensioner goes right down in here between the water pump and this cam shaft sprocket there. Right, so we've now got the tensioner fitted. What we've done is done it up, but not really tight, just almost nipped it up. And what we're now going to do is use the Allen key in the little tensioning positioner to put it in the most sort of slack or untensioned position so that the cam belt goes on with ease. Yeah, and hopefully that shows that quite well. You can see sort of that eccentric cam moving, and you get in almost a much slacker position to that tensioner so that we can get the belt on hopefully as easy as possible. Some people do put the camber on and then push the tensioner in and then bolt it up. We find that quite difficult and prefer to get it in the untensioned position and perhaps struggle a little bit more with the belt, but it does seem to work for us. So we're now ready to put the cam belt back, so we're just having one final check that the locking tool's in and our two white lines are aligned, which hopefully you can see. And then down at the bottom we just check that on the little cog there that the two little dots which we've marked white line up with that little line on the engine which we've painted white, so it's all lining up. So we're now ready to put the belt on. So putting the belt on it is a case of just dropping it down and then steadily threading it on, and what we normally do is try and get it on halfway all the way around. What we've also done is kept the belt indoors in an upstairs warm room so that it's nice and warm and flexible, and hopefully should go on. It certainly helped us when we did the last cam belt like that. Right, so what we've done is we've got the belt over everything round about halfway, as you can see, and once we've done that we can then just gently push it on so that it goes right over the cogs, and basically we're doing that all the way round with the water pump and the top cogs as well. And as you can see up here at the top, we're doing exactly the same, just gently pushing it on so it goes over the cogs. Right, so now we've got the belt fully on all the way round, and it always is a struggle. It was this time, but once it's done, it's then on. What we've now got to do is get the tensioner in the correct position, and we'll show you how you do that next. Right, so what I've done is I've got a nice little close-up of the tensioner for you, and if I tilt it there you can see the Allen key is in that little offset oval shaped piece that allows you to tension it. And you can see, if I point with this, you've got this little slot here, and that's got to line up with this piece of like sprung metal that goes over the bolt. So we're now going to twist it, and you can see it moving there until it lines up. And when it does line up, then you then tighten the bolt to keep it in to that position. And as you can see, that's lined up pretty well. So the next thing to do is to tighten it into that position. Right, so we're now going to put the main pulley back on the bottom of the engine so that we can rotate it and check everything's still in time. So you know that's in the right place. It's actually got a little keyway, so you can see a little line there on that cog, and then if we lift the pulley up, you can then see that there's a little notch out of the middle of that pulley that lines up with the notch on the cog, so that you know you've got that lined up, and your timing markings will still line up when the main pulley is on.
So we're just putting this on temporarily now to turn the engine over.
Right, so we're ready to put the first part of the engine mounting back. What we're doing, as you can see, is just putting a little bit of copper grease on the shoulders of the bolts so that they don't rust into that mounting, and then they're a job to get out if ever we need to do it again, which is likely, because if ever you need to do a cam belt or a water pump, then you will need to do it. Right, so we're now putting the first bit of the engine mounting on. It's the bit that attaches to the engine through the cam belt, and it's a few bolts, and of course one of those bolts you can only get to before you put the cover on, the bottom cover that is. That's why we're doing that first. And you might have noticed we also put all the bolts into that bracket and put it up with them in, because otherwise it is quite a fiddle to get the bolts in, because this big sort of chassis member there is in your way. So that's why we did it like that. And actually this is the only bit that probably changes the most on all the twin cam K series engines. This cam belt job would more or less be identical, but one thing that always changes is this mounting. But again, it's always similar, but that's the bit that does seem to change the most whatever it's used. Right, so as you've just seen, we've just set the tensioner and got it nice and tensioned, and hopefully you can see that the two little lugs, or that little lug in the middle there, lines up with this piece of black metal there. So that's now tensioned. Our timing marks at the top are both lined up, which they should do because our locking tool is still in there. And if we come down to the bottom here, hopefully you can see that down here that that line, if I get my camera right, lines up with the two little dots on the cog. That line's in between those two cogs with the two little dots there that I think you can just about see. So at this point we're now going to turn the engine over twice. When we say twice, that means that the bottom will turn twice, so that cog will go round twice, but up here at the top they will only go round once. So the bottom of the engine, the pistons in that safe position are all right down at the bottom, and they will come up, go down to the bottom, come up and go down to the bottom again, and that will mean we've turned the engine over all the way round back to the safe position up here. Because technically, if you get it marked wrong, you notice on these cogs there are lines here, here, and the two we've marked white. So there's technically a position that looks like you're in the safe position, but you're actually only halfway round up here, but down there you look as if you've gone all the way around. So that's why you do it twice at the bottom, only once up here at the top. And another way to check is you'll notice, and it might not be so clear on these because we've painted them, you've got a little in there and a line, and then an in there and a line, and they should always face the front in the safe position, and the exhaust markings will both face the back, and that's another way to check you've got that safe position right. Hopefully that's made a little bit of sense, but as we always say, it's worth following the book in case anything we do can mislead you. But if you read it with that and see our visual stuff, hopefully that starts to build up a little bit more of a picture. Right, so we've pulled our locking tool out and we're now ready to turn the engine over twice, and up the top here it will turn round once. So we've now turned the engine over once, but as you can see by the white lines, they are now only halfway round. So we'll now turn the engine over again, bringing these white lines all the way round back to where they were. And then we can check all the timing marks line up. So as you see, we've turned the belt all the way round, like I said, and we've still got our alignment up here at the top, and also the tensioner is still lining up as it should do with the little black spring and the notch. And if we come down to the bottom, you'll see that the line is lining up with those dots as well. Again, it's a job to get the camera right to show it lining up in between those two dots, but hopefully you can see that. As I said, I think this engine 75 is a lot awkwarder to film, although there should be more space. There doesn't seem to be. Right, so now we're going to put back the bottom cover, now that we've got that first bit of the engine mounting back. And once we've got that back on, then we'll go back to putting on the rest of the engine mounting. Right, so now that's back positioned right, and again it is sort of a fiddly job of working it in, and don't forget that there is like a little rubber seal that goes up against the mounting. Check that's on, and then it's just a case of putting those little bolts into the bolt holes and doing them up. Right, so we're now going to put the pulley on for the final time, now that we've got the black plastic cover on the bottom. And again, lining that little keyway up, almost like a little notch onto the slot. What we're going to do is do it up with the air gun, get it to kind of near to tight, and then I will then go inside the car, put it in gear, put my foot on the brake, and then we'll do it up to the full tightness. Right, so what we've now done is put the top part of the plastic can cover on, and we've done that before we put the next bit of the bracket on, because we can get all these bolts in and get it slid down a little bit easier without the rest of that bracket in the way. And this cover again is one you sort of have to work down, slide it down and then clip it in. Right, so now it's time to put what we call the bridging bracket. It's the one we painted red on the bench. We've put the copper slip on all the bolts, and then it'll be a case of putting back the bracket there. And as you can see there as well, it's not quite lining up, and that's because the engine has moved. We've got our engine on the jack, so what we then do is jack the engine up and push it slightly over to those bolts align. That's just something you'll probably have to do. And then it's just a case of putting the last metal bit of the bracket, joining it fully to the body. Right, so that's all the mounting, the engine mounting, torqued up and put back together. The next things we've got to do are, of course, put the auxiliary belts back on, and also because we removed the rocker cover and got that painted, we've got to put that back on as well. But yeah, the main parts are done. We can also clip this hose back in its place. Right, so because the rocker cover has been off a little while, although we've had it covered up, you've probably seen with that cloth and the old gasket, we're just going to put a little bit of oil on there so that there is just a little bit of extra protection. It's something we can do, so we might as well do it. The rocker cover, before it goes back on, it needs a gasket, and we always change it if we remove it. Lucky enough, they're not too expensive, and you can easily find them on eBay. I think on most sort of parts places we'll be able to get those gaskets. And of course we've got the 2 auxiliary belts to put on. Once again, we've just looked up for them online and found them pretty straightforward. Right, so we've now got the new gasket on. It's time to put the newly painted cover back on. And then once you've got it lined up, it's a case of putting those bolts back as we've done before. And there is actually a video where we painted one of these rocker covers, so I'm not going to go into a big amount of detail. It's worth having a look at that little video, but I just thought I'd include it in this as we covered taking it off when we were doing that little compression test before we changed the cam belt. Right, so we've now put the auxiliary belts back. That's the one for the power steering going off to that side, and the one at the front of the car goes to the air conditioning and the alternator. Very difficult to film, but it's really quite a simple job because it's automatic tensioners. You've got one there and one there, so it's a case of putting that spanner on, pulling them back, threading the belts back on the way they come off, and then letting the tensioners take up the tension. That's the only good thing about those automatic tensioners.
One.
So we're now just torquing up the bolts in the rocker cover to their torque settings and following the sort of procedure for bolting them up, which there you can see is from the Haynes manual. So we're just going to go through that procedure. Right, so we're now ready to put the spark plug leads in. We've got to put the little sensor in as well that you can just see by the oil filler cap. Before we put the spark plugs in though, we're just going to check the gaps. Often they're normally roughly right, but if not, then you might have to re-gap them. So that's what we're just doing at the moment. And we thread them in by hand before we then tighten them up. We're going to do all 4 of those now. So what we also sometimes do, just to make sure there's no dirt settle, especially being we've had this off for a while, is just to give it a little blowout with the air gun, so that if any dirt's in it, it will blow straight back out. And then we just check down there as well, then we put the next plug in. So we're going to get on with putting those plugs in. We're there just giving it a little bit of a wire brush as well. And what we also do sometimes, if it's looking a little bit dirty, is in the coils and the spark plug leads, we put a teeny little bit of contact cleaner in there just to get rid of any sort of corrosion that might have built up. And we also put it in the ends of the plugs, both of them that go into the coils as well, just to stop any future corrosion, but to clean anything out that is there, because these often do get quite grubby and dirty, and they're changed time after time with new spark plugs, but these never really get changed, so it's always worth checking they're clean. Right, so we're now putting the coils back in. It's always worth remembering to plug this end coil in, otherwise you won't get the plug in with the plastic cowl in there. We're going to do that and put the lid back on. I'm not going into too much detail into this, as there is actually a video we did changing the coils, and we've done service videos as well, but that's what we're going to do and get on with. So the last job is to put the plastic cover on over the coils and the spark plug leads, and that will more or less be the job finished up as we started. So the last thing to do is to add our antifreeze mix. Basically we buy a concentrate and mix it. We mix it to the minimum standards because we don't like too much antifreeze in the system. Right, so we're continuing to pour the antifreeze mix in, and sometimes what you might find is it will fill up and almost seem like it's filled up. You wait a time, then as you can see in the bottom of that bottle, it's now drained down. That's slowly as the airlocks are being dispersed. You've also got there you can see that little bolt, and you can undo that and let some air out at that point. Of course, some of the air is getting released out of the system through these little hoses and coming back to your header tank or filler bottle there. And what we sometimes also find you can do is if you gently squeeze some of the pipes, and that moves the water about, and that sometimes will disperse any air leaks. Once you've done that and the level's not dropping anymore, what we normally do is then use the car or run it for a little while, turn it off. When it cools down, you'll find that a little bit of water's dropped, or sometimes the bottle's empty. Then you fill it up again, and then keep a check through the next week. Every time you use the engine, check the levels, because I think that's one of the problems. Yeah, these systems run very, very well when the water isn't airlocked. Actually, sometimes we think they run better than some other cooling systems, but they are very prone to airlocks when you've had them completely empty. And if you keep a check on it in those early weeks after completely filling a system up, you're more likely to stop future problems. Right, ready? So that is the engine running. Started off a little bit tappety, but that's because it sat there for quite a time. Once the oil moved round, as you can hear, it's now sounding as it should do. So it started up and running, which is always nice to hear after you've done the cam belt. Right, so if I'd come back inside for the end of this video, hopefully we've shown you the process we take when we do a cam belt on a K-series engine in a Rover 75. Of course, that job is very similar on most K-series engines that's got the twin cam and even the single cam. I think really it's only the two cams at the top that change, more or less the route the belt takes, and the job is very, very similar as well. As always, it's more of a video to let you see how we go about doing it rather than a how-to. It's a good visual reference to let you see that process before you take it on, along with all the manuals. And we'd always recommend having the manuals. We use the Haynes manual and the X-Part disc, especially for all the torque settings. And as always, we can never cover every process. So if a bit looks like it's been missed out, it probably hasn't. It's just that we weren't able to cover it, or we were busy doing the job and missed it. We have done it, and all the torque settings are quite important, so it's well worth having the manual. And you know, we think for a job that not only costs quite a bit in parts but in time, and if you get it wrong could ruin the engine, the small amount of manual costs is well worth having. Even if you only got one car, we've got a few in our collection, so it makes it doubly worth it. But even with one car, that manual is still worth it. As always, don't forget to have a look at our Instagram and Twitter page. Have a look at all our videos as we do different jobs and attend different shows and that kind of thing, all on our YouTube channel. And of course, at the moment on this 1.8 Connoisseur SE 2001, we're doing lots of jobs as we bring it up to, I suppose not standards, but bring it up to the things we like to do when we take on a car. There's going to be a lot of those, and even if you come across this video when it's a little bit older, all those videos are going to be together, and there's a playlist for that car or this car we're in. So do check that out as well, and hopefully there grows we do more stuff. As always, thank you very much for watching.